Hello. So yes, this is me. I went through cancer and chemo all of last year. Seems like my hair fell out and it came back super thin. Everybody always says, well, when you lose your hair to chemo and it grows back in, it's always super full and curly. Mine feels like it's way less full. It is long now, but there's so many bald spots. Well, that's why I still wear my wigs. But anyway. So I normally put this, I don't know if it works or not, but I normally put this, sorry if it's backwards, I'm recording selfie ways. It's called Grow Long. I got it in my Ipsy bag. Ipsy is wonderful. I love Ipsy. I add a little bit to my hair. I don't know if it helps it or not, but anything to make my hair grow. I also add, if I can find it, this agave and lavender design essentials oil. I add this to my wigs too. It helps with frizz. Watch what I'm doing because I really want to get into my son's story. So a lot of you have heard about my son, Enrique Rios. He was born in Woodland on Davis on January 2nd, 2000. He was my little New Year's gift. One day off. I remember all the babies at the hospital that were born on the 1st were getting prizes and all kinds of little onesies. I didn't get anything for Enrique, but I could care less because I had my little gift with me. The most important little thing I could have was my son. I had him when I was 16. And he changed my life. I was going down a path that I probably wouldn't have graduated high school because I was skipping school, not doing too well, not doing my homework. And after I had my son, I realized that I had this little thing depending on me, this little thing that ate and pooped all day long, depending on mom. And I needed to do whatever I could to provide for him. And got a job, started working. We lived with my mom up until I was 18, and then I moved out because I was still a little bit of a rebel there. Moved out for a while. We were together for, it was basically brother-sister relationship, Enrique and me, because we were so close in age. We moved back with my mom for about a month and a half. I got a city job for Woodland, and then Enrique and me had our own apartment. So we moved in because we found an apartment that I could afford. So I had a good job with the city. We moved into this nice little apartment in Davis, and we couldn't be happier. He was always my little best friend, basically. I met my husband he always says 2009. I, for some reason, always think 2008. I'm sure he's right because he's really good with dates. And Enrique's dad was never in the picture. But when my husband became my boyfriend, he was there. When he moved in with us, after a few months, he moved in with us, and he would work in Woodland. I worked in Davis. So, and Enrique was going to school in Woodland. So my husband would get himself and Enrique up super early and drop him off at my mom's house every morning, maybe by like 5:30 or something. Drop him off at my mom's house, and then he would go to work. That was our morning routine. My husband was a blessing, and he still is. I love him. But he helped me so much with Enrique that it was just incredible. He didn't have to. He was just my boyfriend at that point, you know. And when we married, he was the same. He treated Enrique like his son, and it was just, their relationship was pretty cool. And then as Enrique started growing up, he, you know, like a lot of teens nowadays, started getting into some trouble, hanging out with the wrong group of friends, and he ended up getting arrested and was put on probation. And then we found this program. It's called the YCCP, and it's where students could go to school in the morning from like 8 to 12. Yeah, 8 to 12. And then they have lunch, and then they get shipped off and they all get into a van and get transported over to the Woodland County Fairgrounds, and they all work. They would do like wood shop stuff. But that program was for teens that were at risk. So like teens that were getting in trouble, teens that were on probation, teens that needed help, basically. That program was so good because it started helping teens make money the right way, you know? So they wouldn't have to go out and do a lot of things that a lot of people, I don't say most people, you know, selling drugs, stealing, all that kind of stuff. So my son couldn't be happier with that job because he's like, Mom, I only have to go to school 4 hours of the day. The rest of the day I can go to work. I get $800 every 2 weeks. That was a lot of money for a teenager, but he started buying his own stuff. He was buying himself some good brand jeans and all this, you know, really good stuff. And he was super proud of himself, and I was proud of him too. And he met a really good guy. I got to meet him too. His name is Elijah. Was Elijah Moore. They were in that program together, and their lives were starting to go in the right direction. I was super proud of both of them. I was able to take them both out to lunch one day. And Elijah didn't stop saying, "Thank you, ma'am," to me over and over. He was so grateful. And I'm like, "It's okay, hon. I'm just bringing you guys out to lunch, you know?" So, then fast forward to October 2016, Elijah had gotten into some trouble. I don't really want to do anything negative on about Elijah on this video. Just know that lives should never be taken for any reason whatsoever. And it was just a bad judgment. And the people that this happened to were very upset. And they were looking for Elijah. And since they couldn't find him, one of the guys, his name is Shandell Shannon, he told one of the main guys, which is David Frost, he's like, "Hey, let's get a hold of Enrique. Enrique is Elijah's best friend, or Elijah's friend. And when we get a hold of him, he can have Elijah come to wherever we are." I guess David Frost liked that idea. Shandell was texting Enrique on Facebook Messenger. "Hey, Enrique, you want to come hang out? Let's go. There's a party And this was January 16th, October 16th, 2016. And my son was like, yeah, let's go hang out. So they came to Esparto, picked up Enrique, basically tricked him, lured him to Knight's Landing, where they kept telling him, call Elijah, get Elijah to get over here right now, call him, because we need to get him over here. And Enrique refused over and over. From the courtroom testimony that we had trials already for a David Frost. Apparently, David got out of the car. Shondell got out too, and David asked Shondell, "Hey, should we go through with this?" Shondell said, "Yeah." So David told Enrique to get out of the car. Enrique was in the, I want to say he was in the front passenger. Enrique refused. I'm positive he was pretty much scared at this point. And David shot up with a gun to the sky. And that's when they got Enrique to get out of the car. Enrique got out of the car, and David kept telling him, get a hold of Elijah for us. And Enrique was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And at this point, Enrique knew his life was in danger. I'm positive. And he took off. He took off running. He ran as fast as he could, and David shot towards him, ended up shooting him. Enrique fell. And I guess Enrique was screaming at this point. And David Frost walked up to my son, pulled him back to where he was by the legs, shot him once in the back of his head, and my son was gone. Now these guys got away with it for about 2 years. They buried my son. I guess what happened was, to transport my son's body, they went and borrowed a truck from a family in Knight's Landing that's friends with David Frost. They borrowed his Ford. Supposedly the guy didn't know what they needed it for. David just went and borrowed the truck, and they put my son's body in the back of the truck, took him to his final resting place, buried him, left him there, acted like nothing happened. And the next day when I woke up, I went to wake up Enrique. Our morning routine was always our morning routine was always that I would go wake up Enrique first, because he took forever to try to get out of bed. I would wake him up first, and then start getting ready myself, and then kept going and checking on him. But that morning I went to his room and he wasn't in there. Super weird, because he loved his job, he loved his class, his school. He never wanted to miss a day, even when he was sick or whatever. He didn't want to miss a day because he would lose money. That day I went into his room to wake him up, and he was gone. And I started calling him. His phone would go straight to voicemail. He never answered. finally, a little bit later in the morning, when I was getting ready to go, somebody texted me from his phone. I knew it wasn't Enrique just by the way the person messaged me. It was just completely off. So I called probation and I told them, I said, Enrique's not here. He's not going to make it into school. I don't believe he's going to make it into school because I'm not sure where he's at. And I asked them to continue to call him, please, because I just wanted him to get to school. You know, I didn't think anything was wrong at this point. So I guess they started calling. He didn't answer them either, obviously, because he had been murdered the night before. And then later in the day, I got a text message. Also did not sound like Enrique. Apparently the person that kept my son's phone was Chandel Shannon. And he's the one that was texting me, saying, hey mom, I just need to be, I need some time alone. I need to be a free man. All this weird stuff that Enrique never talked like. And then I would try to call him and his phone would go straight to voicemail. So then I started calling the phone company, asking them if they could trace his phone. And they said that since the phone was shut off, they couldn't trace it. So at this point, I was like, okay, something really weird's going on, because Enrique would never shut his phone off. If I would call and he didn't want to answer, he just didn't answer, you know. He didn't switch his phone off. He always had his phone on because he was always scrolling through it, making videos, listening to music. His phone was never off. If he didn't want to talk to mom, he just didn't answer, and that's it. So I was at this point thinking something really weird's going on. I called the police. I made a report the next day since he hadn't been home. And they came out, took a police report, and they didn't really take it serious. I'm over here worried, wondering where my son's at, and the police were just kind of like, oh, he's ran away before, because in 2014 he did run away for like 2 days, but his phone was never shut off. Once again, he would just not answer my calls. But anyway, so that happened. The police were just kind of like, oh, he'll be home, don't worry about it, blah blah blah. And I kept calling them and complaining and saying, hey, you guys really need to figure out what's going on with my son, because this is not like him. He doesn't do this kind of stuff. He would have been home by now. The first time he ran away, I put missing flyers everywhere. I put, you know, his missing status all over Facebook. And he came home because he was completely embarrassed that his face was all over social media and his face all over flyers everywhere. So he came home and he was like, Mom, I'm okay. Why are you doing all this? And this time, his face was all over social media. I was calling his friends because I had a call log that I was calling all the people he would hang out with. Flyers were everywhere, and nothing. He never showed up. So I told the police, something is definitely wrong this time. You guys really need to take this more serious. And I want to say they lost very valuable time because they didn't take my son's story seriously. I called the news and asked them to please share my son's story on the news, letting everybody know that he was missing, because he was missing. I was like, you know what? This is not like my son. He wouldn't have been gone this long. It had been like 2 weeks by that point. And the police still were like, oh, you know, he'll be home. Don't worry. So, and the news told me, oh, I'm sorry, we can't share his story because we have to share it only if the police says that this person's really a missing person. I had already called Center for Exploited Children and reported him missing. I had a police report number, so they were able to set him up with flyers. They sent me flyers. We were doing everything. We had gone around and posted everywhere. Facebook was plastered with my son being missing, and still nobody was listening to me. Nobody wanted to help me. It took for another child to go missing, like 3 weeks later, for them to finally believe me. So his friend Elijah Moore finally got found by these guys, and they found him on a payday, I believe, Friday. He had just turned 17. They found him and they took him. They kidnapped him. They made him take off his shoes. They put him in the trunk of the car and they took him to Knight's Landing, where they bound him by the feet and by the arms. And David Frost told his brother Jonathan Frost and Shondell, stay with him. Me and Jesus are gonna go get supplies at Home Depot. So Jonathan and Shondell had a chance to free Elijah. And they all could have left, called the police and said, hey, this guy right now is planning to murder this teenager. He's at Home Depot with another teenager. Go arrest him because he already murdered somebody else. They had a chance. Supposedly they were scared for what David could have done to them. What could he have done if the police went to arrest him? Seriously, what could he have done? Nothing. And they could have saved Elijah's life. But anyway, I don't believe that. They were scared. Finally, Elijah begs and asks if he could please call his mom. He wanted to speak to his mom just one more time. And they said no. And he asked them if they could please pray with him. They prayed with him. And then David Frost came back from his trip shopping for supplies to murder this poor child. And he told him, sorry, your prayers didn't save you. And he told Elijah to get up. They walked him over to this big ditch and said, you're going to be buried next to your friend. That's when Elijah realized that these guys had murdered Enrique and he was next. They pushed him into this huge ditch, I guess, that they had buried, where they were going to, that they had dug where they were going to bury him. Pushed him in. And they all began hitting him with a log, with a stick or something. They all began hitting him on his head. And basically beat him to death, literally. Every single one of them took turns hitting him over and over. And these guys had a chance to free Elijah, and they didn't. I can't believe them, those guys that were left with him. They had a chance to free him, let him go, call the police and say, hey, David Frost murdered this other child, and now he's about to murder this other one. Please come now because he's almost back. But this time they all took part in hitting Elijah. afterwards, they pushed him in, they had already pushed him into the hole, but they lit him on fire. They ended up turning off the fire because the flames were starting to get too big and they didn't want to get caught. So they ended up putting out the fire, and they burned their clothes. They had extra clothes because they went to David Frost's house, I guess, and they got extra clothes for all of them. So they burnt their clothes, and then they drove to get extra clothes from David Frost's house. Then they went to Denny's with Elijah's money that they stole from him. The money he had just cashed. They went to Denny's and ate after they committed this murder. They were able to go and eat. Now, tell me, who can do that? Who can murder someone and then just go act like nothing's wrong and go and eat? These four monsters can, obviously. And their family, when these guys finally got caught because of all the evidence, the families would harass me. I'm over here putting on Facebook, you know, these are the four guys that murdered our children. Please be careful. Don't let your kids trust other people. The family member of one of these guys would absolutely harass me and say, my child didn't murder your son. He was there. He was part of it. I am not stupid. Maybe you guys are stupid because you don't believe that he was taking part of this. And then they all try to have the lawyer play that he was mentally incompetent. So this dragged the courts on for a long time because they had to make sure he was mentally competent to stand trial. After all of this, they finally found out that he was mentally competent to stand trial, and he's able to stand trial now. Then we had this trouble with Jesus Campos because he was 17 at the time of my son's murder, and they were trying to try him as a teenager, not as an adult. And there we go. We had more delayed trial, delayed court, because his lawyer was trying to say that he was just a teenager, he was just a child, and try to get him to be tried as a teenager, not as an adult. Well, the judge didn't believe any of that because of all the paperwork that they showed from schools, all the programs he was in, everything that he, all the help he got, and he was receiving help at the time he murdered our children. He was receiving help to be a better person and all this other crap. And at the time that this happened, he was supposedly receiving help that didn't work. And they wanted him to be tried as a minor so he could get more help. Dude, he murdered our children while receiving help. And it didn't help, obviously, because of what happened, obviously. But finally, the judge was like, yeah, needs to be tried as an adult. So they transferred all his stuff to adult court. Hallelujah. I was super excited when that happened, because if they would have tried him as a minor, he would have been able to get out at like 25. So like 10 years or less. And for David Frost, what happened with him was he went to trial by himself because he was like, yeah, I don't want to waive my time. I want to go to trial. I want to get this over with. And he was found guilty. First-degree murder for Elijah. And I think a lesser charge for the murder of Enrique. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly why, but he was eligible for the death penalty, and we decided not to press that because his brother, Jonathan, had turned state's evidence, and we were all afraid that if we pushed for the death penalty, that Jonathan would be like, no, never mind. I don't want to testify against my brother because if I testify and he's found guilty, I'm going to kill him because, the death penalty. So we decided to just push for life without parole. And that's what he got. Some people, I was pushing the trial, all over Facebook. Some people joined us. Some people sat in there with us. But the day of the verdict for David Frost, that courtroom was super packed, and I was very grateful for everybody that came, showed their support. People online that showed their support, said that they were there with us spiritually, even though they couldn't be there with us physically. I was so nervous when they read the verdict. I just remember they said guilty, and I popped up out of my seat and I sat back down, and I was super, super happy, and I couldn't stop crying. All throughout the trial, I believe it was like a month long or longer. All throughout the trial, they kept trying to get this moved to a different venue because we had a high-profile case, and they said that he wouldn't get a fair trial, but we were able to keep it in Yolo County. And while we were doing the trial, I was going through chemo because why do I keep saying January? I think it's because Enrique's birthday's in January. All throughout the trial, or all throughout when Enrique was missing, I was getting sick, and I wasn't sure why I was sick. So finally went to the doctor, and on March of 2018, I was diagnosed with cancer, breast cancer. And on April 5th, I had a double mastectomy. And then got my port, which I still have right here. And that's the little part, that's part of the port. Everybody thinks it's a vein. It's not. This is my port. I got chemo the whole time I was going to court. I was also going to chemo. So the days that I would have chemo, which is a full day, I was there from like 8 to 4:30. The days that I would get chemo, obviously I wouldn't go to court, but the day before and the day after chemo, whether I felt sick or not, I told my son that I promised him I would be in that courtroom no matter what. And I was there whether I was sick, whether I was nauseous, whether I was tired. I was in that courtroom. I never failed my son because I told him, since you can't be here, hon, to protect yourself and to be a witness to everything that happened, I'm going to be there for you. So I went to court for him every single day. Nobody could keep me out of that courtroom. Nobody. There was no way. So when that verdict was read, I was very excited. The next month we got to hear the sentencing, which was life without parole. And so last time I checked, he was at Salinas State Prison, David Frost. I'm not sure if he's still there because every once in a while they move people around, but so that's where he gets to hang out for a couple years until they do transfer him, because I think they transfer prisoners every once in a while. So that's where David Frost is. And then because of this whole coronavirus, we haven't been able to do the trial for Shondell and Jesus. So we're going to have their trial together. And because of the coronavirus, the trial was supposed to be held sometime in June, but because of the coronavirus, we can't go through with the trial because the courts aren't open. They're just open for you to go and like pay bills and stuff like that. So we're hoping sometime in September. We still don't have the exact date. We're hoping sometime in September we can finally begin jury selection and the trial, because these guys have been in jail since June 2018, and they haven't gone to trial yet. And I'm just like, you guys, already with this needs to be over. And they haven't told us where they buried our sons. They're already in jail. David's already in there for life, and they still don't want to tell us where our sons' bodies were buried. This is just unbelievable. They're not getting out. And if they do get out, there's going to be a lot of people in the streets that don't like them. So hopefully they can stay safe. Our son's story was, it was read by a lot of people. It was, people always still message me and tell me how sorry they are. The reason I push so hard to make sure everybody knows about our son's stories is because I don't want this to happen to anybody else's children. I want kids to see this story and be more cautious with who they hang out with. Tell their parents a little bit more about what they're going through or what's going on in their lives or whatever. I don't want this to happen to anybody else. This is the worst feeling I've ever gone through. And if I could save one child from this happening to them, then I've done my job. That's the only reason I push my son's story so hard. And Facebook post all the time. There's 2 pages. One is Bring Enrique and Elijah Home, and one is Angels for Enrique and Elijah. I don't usually do it so much anymore, but I try to put a picture a day of my son's, of his memories, put a picture a day of him, of what happened in his life, with the picture and a little bit of him, his story, and to try to save anybody that this is going to go through, to try to save another child from going through this, another family from having to feel my pain. I don't want anybody to feel this pain. And I've said this before, I don't even want my worst enemy to ever have to go through this. Ever. Because losing a child it's the worst feeling in the world. Everybody's like, oh, you should be getting used to it by now. You should, a lot of people, because not everybody says that to me. Oh, you have to start to learn to live with it. How does one begin to learn to live with having part of your heart gone forever? Can you live without part of your heart? Can you continue to live normally without being depressed every day when one of your children is gone forever? Tell me, besides monsters that don't love their children and murder them, who is able to live their lives without their children? Who? I don't think anybody is. So to those who have shared their sympathies with us, we really appreciate it. And Here's the princess. Oh, she... Ah! My little angel, my baby. The only one that keeps me sane right now. So if anybody has any questions, if anybody needs any motivation, if anybody needs anything, you could message me on Facebook. My name is Lola Gutierrez on Facebook. You can also send me a message through Bring Enrique and Elijah Home. If anybody's going through something similar and you need just someone to talk to, please message me, because I know the darkness that follows every parent of a missing or murdered child. That darkness is just unbelievably horrible. I don't know how to explain it. It's the worst feeling, knowing that your child is gone forever. Some parents are able to bury their children, but we even haven't been able to find our children. Our children are somewhere out there, and we still haven't been able to bury them even. So if anybody just needs someone to talk to, please message me. If anybody needs anything, please, I'm here. The reason that I do this is to share my sympathy with you too, and to help anybody going through this horrible depression that follows parents when their children are no longer with us. I appreciate you guys. This is probably going to be one of my longest videos. I don't normally post too much or too long of a video, and this one has been almost, well, it has been a 40 something minute video. And I appreciate you guys sitting through it and listening to it. So yeah, that's our part of our son's stories. If you have any other questions regarding it, please message me and share our story so we could save another child from going through the same thing our children went through. All right, thank you.